Recording in progress. Hello, fellow gardeners. Welcome to our Spice It Up Growing Culinary Herbs presentation. This presentation is being presented by the Master Gardeners of Placer County. Our presenter today is Heidi Peacock Morrow. She is a 2022 Master Gardener graduate. She is a fifth-generation farm girl, having grown up in Tulare County. Take it away, Heidi.
Hello, fellow gardeners. It's so nice to join you this evening. We're here to talk about growing culinary herbs. Who are the Master Gardeners? Master Gardeners of Placer County extend research-based, sustainable gardening and composting information. We present accurate information to home gardeners and encourage the public to make informed gardening decisions. Where can you find us? You can find us on the hotline. You can also find us on our website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Gold Country Media. We have a monthly column, the Curious Gardener quarterly newsletter, and you can subscribe to that on our website, and also our wonderful gardening guide and calendar. You can also find us at Speakers by Request, workshops, various venues. You can check our website, farmers markets in Auburn, Roseville, and Lincoln, fairs and festivals, our garden fair, and our wonderful Mother's Day garden tour. For today's agenda, we're going to talk about the definition of herbs, the benefits of growing herbs, herbs in our garden, propagation, harvest, preservation, storage, common culinary herbs, and some unusual culinary herbs. So let's talk about the definition of herbs first. The word herb comes from the Latin word herba, which means grass or green plant. Most herbs are herbaceous plants without a permanent woody stem. However, the broad term herb often includes flowers, vegetables, grasses, and even trees. What's an herb versus a spice? Generally, the herb is considered the softer part of the plant, including stems, leaves, and flowers, and spice is the hard part of the plant, such as the roots, bark, or seeds. What's in it for me as a gardener? Herbs from the garden are fresh and high quality. They're a healthy way to add flavor to food. They're always available in your garden, a great way to save money. And unique to the gardener, you can grow unusual herbs that aren't usually available in your grocery store or at your farmer's market. They also add amazing beauty to your garden, attract pollinators, and many herbs are deer resistant. And best of all, it's fun and rewarding. Here's a picture of a little friend of mine up at our cabin. I used to say I didn't have deer on my property, but since my garden has grown so luscious, I now have deer coming onto my property. But here's some deer-resistant herbs: lavender, sage, thyme, mint, catmint, oregano, and rosemary. Those are herbs that often the deer do not prefer. Herbs in your garden. This is a picture of one of our fellow Master Gardeners' gardens. You can see she's growing herbs on the edge of her orchard. There are a lot of different locations for herbs, but you want to make sure that you have well-drained soil, access to water, and 6 hours, minimally 6 hours of sun. And one of the things I would like to suggest that you make it convenient for daily visits. My herb garden is right outside my kitchen door, and I generally visit it on a daily basis. So here's some great gardener's tips. Never use any fertilizer or pesticide that isn't labeled for use on edible plants on your herbs. Growing culinary herbs is very similar to growing vegetables. Herbs luckily have few problems with pests and diseases, and most annual herbs taste their best before they flower. And you want to pinch and use your herbs often to keep them growing. What's in a Latin name? A common name versus a Latin name, or a botanical or scientific name. Make sure that you have the correct plant by paying attention to that Latin or botanical name. You want to check the plant tag and make sure that you actually have an edible plant. Many plants have similar common names, so you want to make sure you know you have the botanical name of the plant, so you're eating something that is actually edible. Where does your herb garden grow? You can grow herbs in many different places: indoors, in pots and containers, in a cottage garden, a perennial garden, a vegetable garden, in raised beds, just in your yard amongst your other plants. There are a lot of options for where you can grow your herbs. You can also make herbs a star in your landscape. You can have herbs that serve as ground cover. Creeping thyme makes a great ground cover. Oregano also makes a great ground cover. Be aware, oregano spreads rapidly, so you want to make sure it's an area you want well covered. Some great edging herbs are parsley and chives. Some nice vines that you can use include hops, and the bay laurel is a great tree to make a star in your landscape. Herbs are also great pollinator-friendly plants. It's one of my favorite parts of growing herbs. So please welcome those pollinators into your garden. They're so important to our ecosystem. This is a picture of a honeybee and a rosemary plant in my garden, and they attract many bees, not just honeybees. They also attract native bees. So there's a lot of different pollinators that come to your garden beyond just honeybees. Native bees, beetles, bats, flies, wasps, butterflies, and moths are all pollinators that we can welcome into our garden. And here's a link for you if you're interested in learning more about pollinator-friendly plants. How do we propagate culinary herbs? There's several different ways you can propagate culinary herbs, including seeds, cuttings, layering, and dividing. So for seeds, you want to make sure you grab your seed packet and really check out the information that's on the back of the seed packet. You can follow the directions there. Usually you start indoors or outdoors after the last frost. You want to use a sterile, lightweight soil, water gently and keep it moist, provide good air circulation. And typically seeds are best for annuals such as basil, dill, cilantro, or parsley. For cuttings, you want to make a slanted cut, remove the bottom leaves, and dip in rooting hormone. It's optional, but it does seem to make your cuttings more successful if you do use rooting hormone. Plant them in moist, fast draining potting mix and cover. And this is the best technique for woody herbs such as lavender, geraniums, sage, or rosemary. For layering, a lot of herbs respond really well to layering. You want to layer the plant on top of a rock, take a branch or dig a little trench and mound the soil over the top of the branch, and the roots will form at the nodes. So you don't want to cut the stem from the mother plant. You want to keep it attached and then bury that portion where the node is. That's where the leaves, the buds, the leaves, and the twigs originate, and you want that piece to have soil contact. And then once it roots, it can be removed from the parent plant, and you have a new plant. And many herbs will self-layer. Mints, oregano, rosemary, thyme, savory, even lavender will sometimes do it on their own. But this is another way of creating a new plant. You can also divide, and that's best done in early spring or fall. Early spring for fall blooming plants or fall for spring blooming plants. You want to dig out the root ball and the soil and use a knife or a shovel or a trowel to split off the healthy sections. And this works really well for chives, oregano, tarragon, sorrel. Those are all great plants for dividing. For harvesting herbs, you want to do the harvesting early in the morning after the dew is evaporated while the herbs are still fresh. You want to continuously harvest throughout the season. Pinch back your herbs often, and young plants need to be pinched back to encourage them to branch and become more full as well. For preserving herbs, there's several different options. For drying, you want to remove the discolored leaves, Make small bundles and hang them upside down in a warm, airy, dry location away from direct sunlight. You want to make sure you have good air circulation. And for drying seed heads, you can enclose them in a paper bag or a fine mesh bag in order to capture those seed heads. And this works well on herbs such as dill. You can also package the whole leaves in airtight containers. You want to store it away from direct sunlight and avoid heat and humidity. And you want to make sure those herbs are really dry. If there's any moisture detected when you store your herbs, they're not dry enough and you might experience some mold or mildew. So make sure you have those herbs really dry before you store them away in an airtight container. You can also freeze herbs for some of those herbs that lose their flavor when they're dried, such as cilantro or basil or chives. You want to mince and freeze them in water in an ice cube tray, or you can also make them into a pest, such as a pesto, and freeze them that way. And a great way to do that is to add a half a cup of oil. I use olive oil to 2 cups of packed herbs, and it's just a pesto that freezes nicely, and you can pull that out of your freezer and use it year-round. So a handful of herbs can really change your everyday cooking from basic sustenance to really gourmet food. It really makes your dishes exciting. So some of the herbs that are really wonderful for cooking, we'll talk about some of the more common ones, and then we'll talk about a few more unusual herbs. But basil is an annual, and it's best in full sun. You can preserve it by freezing, and typically you want to use seeds or seedlings to start that in your garden. And it's used in pasta, pesto, pizza, salads, and tomato dishes. I have a basil plant right outside my kitchen, and every morning when I make my breakfast, I walk out to the garden and pinch off a little bit of basil and add it to my egg that I'm having for breakfast. So there's basil's just so universal for a lot of dishes. Another great herb is a chive, which grows from a bulb. It needs full sun or part shade. This can also be preserved by chopping and freezing. And the flowers are great for garnish in your salads. It can be used in salad dressings with eggs, potatoes, and seafood. There's so many options for chives. Cilantro is an annual. Typically, you want to start it from seed. In our area, it's great to grow it in a semi-shaded area because it will bolt or go to seed quickly. Cilantro is also coriander, so the seeds can be used as coriander and the leaves and the stalk are cilantro. So it's used in many Asian and Latin and African dishes. And the seeds are used in baking and pickling. And once again, just be aware, it can bolt on you. So you want to pinch it back and try to keep it in a shady area. This is a picture of Thai coconut soup, which I love. And it has, I use a lot of cilantro in that dish. And there's many other herbs in Thai coconut soup as well. Dill's another great herb to grow from seed. You can direct seed it into the garden, but it will also bolt in hot weather. So you can keep it in full sun, or if you have a shadier area, it'll do okay in part shade. You want to harvest the leaves before it blooms, and then with seeds, you want to harvest the seed heads as they become brown and dry. And it's good for more than just pickles. So try it with fish or in your potato salad, obviously. Parsley is another great herb. This is another one that you can sow by seed in the spring or in the fall. It'll take full sun to part shade, and you want to harvest those leaves when they get to be about 6 to 8 inches long. And parsley is one that does lose its flavor when it's dried. Here's a gardening tip. For cooking, you always want to use the flat leaf or Italian parsley. It has better flavor in your dishes, but curly is great as to add to your plate as a garnish, and it also makes a nice edging plant in your garden. But for cooking in an actual dish, I would suggest that you stick to the flat leaf. Mints are best propagated by stem cuttings or root division. They love full sun to part shade. There's so many different varieties of mint: pineapple, orange, spearmint, so many types of mint. One of my favorites is pineapple. I love the scent of pineapple mint. Here's a very important warning. Mint is invasive and it's best grown in containers. Do not allow the plant to touch the ground. And I've also been cautioned to warn you, don't let the hole in the pot touch the ground either, because your mint will escape out the bottom of the pot and your garden will be invaded. So just be aware. Mint is a great plant to grow, but you do not want to have it escape into your garden. And this is a picture of some little mini brownies that my daughter made for her friends. And that's a little mint leaf and a raspberry there. And it just makes a cute little dessert dish. Oregano is also an herb that's great to propagate from seeds, stem cuttings, or root division. It's really easy to start from a stem cutting or root division. I would really recommend that way, doing it that way, because the seeds do tend to germinate slowly, but it can be grown from seed. It's also it can be a bit invasive, so it grows quickly. Make sure that you choose a spot where you're okay with it spreading, or just keep a handle on its growth because it will grow really quickly. There's several different types. So there's Greek, Italian, spicy. One of my favorites is I like spicy food, so I enjoy the spicy oregano in a lot of my dishes. Here's one of my favorites. When I think about herbs, I really fall back on rosemary all the time. I literally use it year round. It's so consistent and so easy to grow. So it does grow more as a shrub. It's best to propagate by root division if it's the prostate rosemary, and upright varieties also do well from stem cuttings in the spring. It can do full sun to part shade. It doesn't need a lot of water. And it'll bloom in spring and in summer. And for harvesting, you just want to use that top 3 to 4 inches where the plant is more tender and not as woody. And here's a gardener's tip. UC Davis All-Star has a rosemary called barbecue. So it grows straight, strong branches that are really nice to use as a skewer for barbecuing. So you can just add your items right onto that rosemary branch and do it up on the barbecue. And it's a really nice herb, and it's carried in many of the local nurseries. And you can also get it at the UC Davis Arboretum. And this is also an example of rosemary lemon bread that my daughter made, and rosemary is great in bread as well. This is a really lovely little sage. This is a tricolor sage, and it's really beautiful in the garden. Once again, sage can be grown by seeds or cuttings or layering or root division. I would suggest again to do cuttings or layering or root division. It's a little slower from seed, but it can be done. It blooms in summer. This tricolor is so beautiful in the garden, so it makes, even if you're not using a lot of sage, it's a nice plant to grow just for its visual appeal. A cooking variety of sage that's preferred is a Burr Garden sage. It's not as easy to find in this area, so it's a challenge for you if you run across it. I would love to hear from you, because I'd like to get a little for my garden. I grew it when I lived on the Central Coast, but I don't actually currently have it in my garden at home. Thyme is amazing. There's so many different types of thyme as well. It also is great to propagate by stem cuttings. It can grow in full sun or part shade, low water. You want to harvest thyme before it blossoms. So when you want to pinch it back before it gets a chance to bloom. But I do let some of my thyme plants go to blossom because they're just so beautiful and they do attract the pollinators. So plant more than one so that you can pinch one back and use it for cutting and leave the other one for the pollinators to enjoy. It also grows in many different heights. So you can grow thyme anywhere from, 1 inch to 1 foot. So there's so many varieties out there and options to try. Now I want to talk a little bit about some unusual culinary herbs. So the first one I have is stevia, and this is some plants that I planted in my garden earlier this year. And stevia leaves can be used fresh or dried. They can be ground as a sugar substitute to sweeten desserts, fruit, and drinks. My daughter uses it to add to her tea as a sweetener. You can propagate them by stem cuttings, or they can be grown from seed. And I haven't propagated this one from stem cuttings myself, but I did give away some cuttings from my plant and was told that it was really easy to propagate. So it's a good way to continue propagating this plant. It prefers warm, moist, sunny conditions, and you can harvest the leaves and dry those and preserve them to use year-round. Another unusual culinary herb is saffron, and it grows from a corum, and you want to plant the bulbs in the fall in September where they will get sun when they're in full bloom. The way you harvest saffron is from the stigma and the styles. We call these threads, and that's within the flower itself. So the reason why it's so expensive when you see saffron in the store is because of the difficulty of harvesting it. Farmers have to harvest those delicate threads by hand from each flower. So it is a challenge, but if you're just doing it for your personal use, it's nice to grow it in your garden. You don't have to spend all that money for the saffron, and it's very easy to grow. It's not a difficult plant to grow in your garden. Here's another unusual culinary herb. This is shiso, and it's used in a lot of Japanese dishes. It's an aromatic herb. You'll often find it in sushi, salads, tempura, noodles, and it has a very unique fragrance and flavor. There are two varieties that I'm familiar with. There's a red shiso, and there's also a green shiso. So those the red shiso is more like cinnamon. It's more like a cinnamon flavor. It's citrusy, and it has hints of mint and basil and clover and cinnamon. It does have a mildly astringent taste and a little bit of a bitter finish, but it's a great herb to grow if you love cooking Japanese or making Japanese dishes. Here's another, maybe not so unusual, but I'd say a fun culinary herb. I love using edible flowers, and violets are one of the easiest to grow. So they enjoy the cool season. They're easily propagated from seed, and they're readily available in the nursery. So they're a fun one to grow. They're edible. Just make sure you're growing them in your garden and that they're pesticide free. It's best if you can grow them from seed, or make sure that you get flowers that have not been treated with any pesticides. Here's a good tip though. They may reseed in your garden for years to come. This isn't my garden. This is a garden that's in the Loomis community. It's a public garden in the Loomis community, but you can see this down here under the wheelbarrow, and that entire bed are filled with Johnny jump ups. So they will continue to come up once you've planted them in your yard. They'll continue to come up on their own. I have them growing in my driveway and in the cracks of my walkway. So I love them, and I'm always excited to see them, but just be aware they can become a bit invasive. Here's some resources for you that you can click to these links when you have an opportunity, and there's some really great information here. I think my most used resource here is the culinary herb profiles. So if you go to that resource, it gives you the plant profile of many common culinary herbs that were not covered today, as well as many of the herbs that we covered today. So that concludes my presentation. I hope everyone goes out into their garden and enjoys herbs. It's a great way to spice up your life and your meal. Take care.
Thank you, Heidi, for that informative presentation on growing culinary herbs. After I heard your presentation in person a couple of weeks ago, I planted a herb spiral garden, and I'm beginning to enjoy some of those herbs that you mentioned.
That's wonderful.
I'd
love to
thank you.
see that, Barbara.
Okay, so be sure, folks, to check out some of our other recorded presentations on our YouTube channel, UC Master Gardeners of Placer County. Thank you. Stop. Yeah.